You're listening to The Broken Meeple Show, a podcast that speaks passionately about board games for the benefit of those who play them. My name's Luke Hector, best known for the Broken Meeple YouTube channel, and I'm an everyday gamer just like you. And I'll be talking about reviews, top 10s, and just about anything that connects me to board games. As long as I have a tea or coffee in hand, that is. So grab a cup, relax, and enjoy. And remember, it's only a game. Hi everyone, Luke Hector here, recording podcast 98. Yeah, we're almost up to the 100 mark, and as I said before, I'll probably do some kind of offline Q&A for that one. Basically the Patreons have given me a lot of suggestions and ideas for questions, and they've requested an offline Q&A, so I figured I'll do that for episode 100, so we'll cross that bridge in a couple of episodes' time. But otherwise, yeah, I hope everybody's having a good time at Gen Con. Naturally, I'm not there because, I didn't have enough holiday this year to do even my Arctic cruise later in December, I didn't have enough holiday for. I had to request some unpaid leave for that. That's how little we got this year when they changed the year ends, annoyingly. But the thing also is just the cost of going to Gen Con is just kind of prohibitive. I mean, it would cost like hundreds to fly there, hundreds to stay in a place, and then you spend a bunch on games or something. It's just like, well, I already go to Essen and stuff, and there's only so many conventions I can go to in a year. But maybe one day in the future we'll work out some financially beneficial way of being able to go to that. And even then, Gen Con's not really the highest on my list to go to because it just seems too much, like too crowded. I mean, every time I look at the video, say, this is day one of Gen Con before the doors were open, and then it's just a stampede. And it's like, why is that fun or desirable to basically be in what the equivalent is of a Spanish bull race? It doesn't really sort of, tickle my fancy. But something like Dice Tower East or PAX Unplugged East, the ones that are on the East Coast, a bit closer to the UK side, could be feasible. We never know, but we'll see. But it's hard to get to American cons. It just really is. But it would be nice if one day I could. Somebody hurry up and help me win the Euro Millions, and then I guarantee I'll be at American cons all year round. That'll be a given. But sadly, as much as I do play the lottery, the winning ticket never comes up for more than a few quid. So, what's happened with the channel? Well, generally not too bad. What are we up to now? 23,900 subs, so we're on the way to 25,000, the next milestone. Won't be too long, I think, before we hit 24 at the rate we're going. Content lately has not been the best in terms of reception. 3 episodes have come out since the last one. One of them I actually think's done pretty well, Empire's End. That was a review for a game that was requested by the Patreons. 2,000 views, not too bad. Only a couple of dislikes. That one did pretty well. But the other two I'm kind of surprised aren't doing as well. Terminus. This is a game that pretty much no one else has talked about outside of Kickstarter previews. And, it's a big, heavy game. It's from the same publisher who did Earth, one of the most popular games out there. So I figured this one would get a lot more buzz. But still less than 2,000 views. And it's been out for at least a few days now. So I'm kind of curious as to why. Although no dislikes is positive to see. So not even the trolls are going after this one. But yeah, I kind of expected this one to get a little bit more interest. And then probably the biggest disappointment was the top 10 tips for running a board game club. I thought that would actually be a topic a lot of people would want to know, but then after thinking about it, it's like, but not everybody's trying to run a club, so why would you necessarily tune into a tips video about it? But it was something I wanted to do. I've had experience with clubs, both good and bad, so I wanted to kind of sort of vent my thoughts on it. And yeah, less than 3,000 views for a top 10 list. I mean, a lot of engagement, which is the main thing. I'm more interested in engagement, a lot of likes and a lot of comments. I mean, look at that, 80 comments. Bear in mind some of that are my replies, but still, it's a lot of comments. But yeah, I don't know, that one just didn't quite work as a top 10 list, so I mean, if you watch it and get some useful information out of it, then fantastic. But yeah, in terms of viewership and the time it took to come up with the list, record it and edit it, these ones take a long time to edit. That one was a bit of a dud. Oh, well, maybe the next top 10 will be better. I mean, the next one on the Patrons list, I think that was highly rated, was top 10 games that induce anger. So that could be one that might get a few more thoughts. And, anger doesn't necessarily mean, oh, I hate the game, it makes me angry. Because otherwise I would just choose my top 10 worst games. Now, we're talking about games that kind of induce anger in a fun, jovial way, if that makes sense. But we'll cross that bridge later because in terms of future content, there's a few reviews I've got to do. I mean, yesterday I recorded the reviews for, which ones were they? Daybreak the Kennerspiel winner. I've reviewed that one, and I've also recorded Wild Gardens. That's sitting in a spare cubbyhole on the shelf there. So both of those have been reviewed. They're going to get edited soon. I also need to play Draft and Write Records from Inside Up Games. That one's going to get a podcast review, not a full review, but I will at least play it I mean, I've already played it at the UK Games Expo. I now need to sort of play it solo a few times and see what it's like. But then also I've managed to acquire by sheer thanks to the Patreons for this. I mean, the Patreons are the only reason I could afford to grab this at the overinflated cost it required. But look at this. Here we go. Arcs. Yeah, this, I had to pay twice, I think, the value of this game, or maybe like 1.5 times the value. It was stupidly expensive. Basically, Zatu Games got some late stock in for this and the Leaders and Lore pack, so I got that included in here as well. I knew it was an inflated price, but I can't sit on this until nigh on what, like Christmas time by the time I would get it played, you know, assuming it came out when it was meant to because of all the Essence stuff. And the fact that this is getting so buzzed and hyped up by some people. I mean, some people hate its guts, but, you know, ever since Shut Up and Sit Down did their show, everybody's now clamoring for this game, regardless of whether they actually know if they'll like it or not, you know, such as the influence they have. So I really wanted to get a chance to play this at least and get some first impressions. Well, now I can do one better for that. I can do an official, honest, non-sponsored review of this, because this is from my own, you know, this is from Patreon pockets. This is, you know, their support helps this show carry on and get these kind of games for me to review, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to afford it. So yeah, you know, no sponsorship, no publisher backing on this, no designer backing on this. This is me giving my honest thoughts on Arcs. I'm learning it today. I'm going to go through all the rules and make sure it's learned, and then throughout the rest of this week, it's been given the beans. You know, I've got multiple meetups planned to play this multiple times. It's no solo mode, so this will just be a case of multiple games, and I'll try and get the review done for this as soon as possible at some point during August. I reckon the amount of times I'm going to get this played in the next couple of weeks, also, I think this will easily get an August release. So, yep, have faith. Arcs is coming. I mean, I even put a little video about it when I got the box saying, oh yes, I'm doing this. It's like someone is tackling the hype train on this one, and it's got to be me. Want anything else for the channel stuff? I mean, I will continue the best and worst series. So, you know, that one, it will get Check Game Editions is the next one I want to do from a publisher perspective. And then after that, I will probably, like I said, I'll probably alternate between publisher and designer. I think that kind of works well. So we got Check Game Editions coming for the next publisher one. Haven't fully decided on the designer one, but I've a feeling I'm probably going to do a Vital Lacerda one. So favorite and worst of Lacerda, because there's certainly plenty to talk about on that one. Cool, the sun's coming bright through that window, but well, big deal. It's a podcast show. What does it matter if half of my face looks like a heavenly halo glow? But yeah, so not too bad. Otherwise, outside of work, it's not bad. Work is giving me a bit of grief lately. I won't go into full details, but it's just, like I say, it's heavy workload plus some other things happening. It's kind of stressing me out quite a bit, you know, and, you know, I've had like some game nights with mates and game club nights, and they've practically been like therapy to try and get over like what work's kind of pulling at this point. And yeah, so I mean, it will resolve. It's just the next couple of months are going to be a bit of a slog, and June and July was already a slog, but I don't think this slog's going to end until probably the end of September. And then at that point, everything will hopefully be back to a nice, pleasant pace, and the other things at work will have dissipated by then. So it's, you know, it's a case of knuckle down and deal with it for 2 months. But the autumn, I'm looking forward to, because, I mean, the sun and the heat has not exactly helped with the whole stress thing. You know, the fact that we've had a heat wave recently in the last few days, which turned the place into a sauna. I've only just managed to cool it down to the point where I'm not actually sweating buckets, but temperature looks normal for the next couple of weeks, so that's hopeful. But the more we get into the autumn, the more it's more comfortable for me to do recordings and just generally live, which is kind of the deal. But then also, once we get past September, which is a very busy month for me as a tax person, because all the accountants want to get their stuff done before September filing date, which is a very popular year end for companies, then my workload will decrease quite a bit, even though I know I've got to get all my December stuff done before the 7th of December, because you know, I won't be around to do that work because I'm going on the cruise. So yes, I do have a little bit of a timetable problem in terms of getting everything done, but I'm confident I'll be able to be in a good state by the time I get there. But the autumn is just, as I say, there's also cool stuff happening in the autumn. I mean, we've got Shape, Battle and Roll at the end of September. There'll be Essen first week of October. Then I've got HandyCon will be at end of October. There'll be GridCon in November. So there's quite a few cool things happening in the autumn, convention-wise and game-wise. So the autumn is just such an enjoyable period for me. And you've got all the Essen games to play. So it's busy, but it's fun, so I'm looking forward to that time. So that should be pretty good fun. But yeah, anyway, on with the show, because there's quite a bit to go into at this point, and yeah, that sun is really coming through. So yeah, sorry, but I could go and close the curtain, but I can't be bothered. So, you're looking at a tiny image of me on the screen here, and those of you listening in audio podcast land don't know what it looks like anyways, or what does it matter? But basically, I've got 4 games I want to talk about, 3 first impressions and 1 full review, and then I want to go into the topic of the day. So let's talk about the review first, all right? This isn't going to take long. It's a short game, but this is Free of a Kind by Tim Eisner at Weird City Games. So this is the same person who put out Leaf, which is something I rated quite highly, Canopy, which is also one I've rated quite highly. I mean, generally, they have put out some pretty solid games. Now, they're also kickstarting soon March of the Ants. I have no idea what March of the Ants is, like in terms of how it plays in that. I never played the original. I am totally down for seeing an evolved edition of it, though. I don't think I'm in the running for, I don't usually look at Kickstarter games 99.9% of the time. So this will be something I'll look into in 2025 when there's a more finished copy available. But yeah, I'm very interested to look into what this game's like. I've heard some good things about the original. But what else have they done? I mean, I don't recognize things like Little Pig and Thistledon. That's kind of new on me. Oh yeah, and they've got Canopy Evergreen coming out later this year, which I'm excited for. So yeah, they do some pretty solid games, and they tend not to get a lot of buzz. But I'm here to tell you that it's worth taking a look. Well, Free of the Kind is basically a little party game. So some of you might have already turned off at the idea of a party game. Well, I mean, stick with me, party games are cool. But this is kind of something that, for me, is kind of like a sister game to something like Hive Mind. It's one of those games where you're trying to think like other players, like come up with the same answer they would. So Dixit Stellar did something recently as well. But I'm getting a little bit tired of Just One. Just One is still a fantastic filler party game, does the job, easy to play and all that lot, but we do it so often in Mondays, it becomes, and we don't just play it for 5 minutes, we end up playing it for like 3/4 of an hour while, going through the filler timetable, and I'm like, okay, seriously, can we play other things during this time, because it is starting to get a little repetitive. Well, this is one that I've been bringing to fill that gap. From 2 to 8 players, 25 minutes, you could play it, does not take long at all. And essentially, it is one of those games, as I said, you have to think like other players. So you try to write matching answers to score more points. But here's the twist. The idea with this game is that you have these different subjects. So like Hive Mind would get you to think like other players so you didn't get kicked out of the hive. But it would come up with questions like 5 things you put in your pocket, 3 things you wear to the theatre or something like that. And so you would come up with relatively serious questions. This one tries to take things in a bit more of a silly view. So you have something that could be innocent, like mode of transportation, mythical creatures, scientific items, I don't know, a serious category. But then what happens is that whoever is choosing the category out of 2 cards, the 3 players after them choose out of 2 adjective cards, describing words to put along with it. So in this case, on the example here, they got modes of transportation, and then they say quickest, smelliest, and most magical. So you can tell that there's some weird combinations there. And then for each one, you write a single answer, and you're trying to come up with the same answer as other people to score more points. So again, it's a bit like Hive Mind. But where this one... I mean, Hive Mind has the advantage of there's no winner, it's just don't be the loser. And the fact that it's got a lot of freedom with serious questions. This one has an advantage for A, being a quicker game by far, but it can create some good laughs with some of these categories. I mean, the most magical mode of transportation, what comes to your mind when you think of that? Well, the example here wrote unicorn. kind of works. It's a horse. You can ride a horse and it's a magical mythical creature. I mean, it works, but, would other people write it? And what would be your first idea? Would you be trying to justify why an airplane or a dirigible or whatever is a magical mode of transportation? It'd be quite cool. And what do you class as a smelliest? I mean, a smelliest mode of transportation? I don't know. Could almost say trains, because most trains smell like a public convenience most of the time. But I'm sure there's better options on that front. People might say boat, because you got to smell the water or something. I don't know. Or taxis, because all taxis tend to smell a bit dodgy. But the idea with this is that you come up with these weird answers. And that's kind of the crux of the game. You play through 6 rounds, see who's got the most points, or if somebody gets to the maximum points before that happens. And it's just very quick, very easy to teach. But the fact that you have these different like questions and adjectives that come up just make it a little bit more of a fun, weird, cheesy game. So, I mean, the other examples here is like the scariest cheese, the happiest item in the junk drawer, the strangest letter of the alphabet. I mean, they do come up with some weird ones, and because players are choosing, they have the option to pick like weird and wonderful stuff. But I'm trying to think of what we had. We had there was definitely like a mythical creatures one, but then we had like some really weird categories would go with that. The most innocent mythical creature, the largest mythical creature, and that. But there are some other weird categories that you can do. So this game, I think, is a solid 7 out of 10. I mean, it's a good game. It gives you a similar vibe to Dixit, Stellar, and Hive Mind. It is definitely a much faster game, though. It's definitely got that advantage. You can play it in pretty much the same amount of time as you'll play something like Just One. But at the moment, I'm enjoying this more than Just One, just because we've played Just One to death. It's getting to the point where, especially with the same people, it's just not as interesting anymore. I'd rather play So Clover. But this one is something a bit different. It's still easy to teach. It's still good fun. Obviously, you're going to need some spare dry erase pens, because they will run out. These ones, dry erase markers, are always a bit finicky. But yeah, this can create a lot of different combinations and a lot of cool, interesting, fun party laughs. Now, 2 to 8 players, you're really going to want to play this with a lot of players. I mean, we played it with 5. And that, I think, is the lowest count you should play this at. If you're going to match with other players, you really want to play this with a good player count. So this is kind of like a 6, 7, 8 player quickie filler party game to play with lots of players who are around. I think playing this with 2 to 4 just wouldn't work. You wouldn't match up enough. And they do have a rule for if you don't match. If you don't match at all, then the person who came up with the adjective gets a point. So I guess there is an incentive to pick something a bit weird and random. But they also get to give a style point to the player who, they think had the best answer out of everyone that's there. So there's other ways to score points. But even so, I don't think 2 to 4 player is really the way to go about this one, ironically, because it's 3 of a kind. But yeah, 5, 6, 7, 8 players, you're in with a good, solid, fun little party game here. So nothing that's going to break the mold. Nothing that's going to suddenly blow the doors off or anything. It's not the most original game out there. We've seen this done before, but this one does it in a cool, fun, quirky way. Cheap, quick. What more do you want from a filler party game? Certainly, I want to bring this out a bit more often than Just One right now, just to add a little bit of variety. Oh, I keep up the drink, because I'm sure my throat's not going to like this episode. Right, now let's talk briefly about some first impressions. So, let's talk bad first. So, remember I did a review a while ago called the Silverwood Grove. It was first impressions, and I said this was one of the worst games I had played in recent years. Like, it was just the epitome of bad board game design. Crooked Crown came by and said, "Hold my beer." Yeah, I played this the other day, and we're going to talk about the other game I played at the same time. And I've seen this played at my Southampton group, and whenever I've seen it played, I've had worries about whether I would like it or not. And so they wanted to play it. It was the end of the night. We thought, well, all right, let's play it. Let me find out what this game's like. Read the rules to it. Had some doubts, just based on reading the rules. Played the game. All my suspicions confirmed, and then some. This game is terrible. Absolutely terrible. 3 to 6 players, but you really should play this with 6, because playing it with any less unbalances some of the cards greatly. But to put it simply, this is one of those chaotic take-that games of randomness. You are essentially trying to end up with the Crooked Crown in your hand of cards at the end of the game. So think Lost Legacy. Although I'm telling you, Lost Legacy did this a lot better. And the idea is that each turn you play a card. There's 4 cards, they have certain effects, and then it goes round 8 rounds, and then who's got it at the end of 8 rounds? That's it. That's the crux of the game. The difference here is that you have cards that steal randomly from other players. You have cards that lower or raise people on this track, which is your hand size. So your hand size is immediate. Every time you gain hand size, you immediately draw cards, and every time you lose hand size, you immediately have to discard. And then there's also one to, what's the other card? And one to look at other players' hands, right? And then there's a wild. So these cards are shuffled up completely randomly. So many are dealt out at the start. One of them has to be the crown, and then you've got to figure out who's got the crown, steal it, and have it at the end of the game. That is literally the whole game. This game is so bad. So bad. All right, so let me tell you about some problems with this. Firstly, yes, I know it's meant to be a kind of random, chaotic game, but cool blimey, is this random as all get out. But it's random, and you don't have enough choices or options. I mean, all right, not choices and options are bad phrase. You have, even no control is the bit. The fact is that when you get information in this game, you don't usually have the means to act upon it. So you have a card for looking at other people's hands, right? In a 4-player game that we played, actually 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we played a 4-player game of this. Looking at someone's hand, and the crux with this is that if you have multiple copies of the same type of card in your hand, you can play them all and it makes the action more powerful. So you play a single look card, you'll look at one player's hand. You play 3 of them, you'll look at everybody's hand in a 4-player game. But basically, first round I play 2 of those and I look at 2 people's hands. I see one of them's got the crown. Every single card I draw for looking at players' hands is now a dead draw from that point. It's complete trash. But you have no means of mitigation for card draw. You draw it randomly, there's no face-up display, what you see is what you get. So I know the crown is sitting in somebody's hand, and because there's only one card in the game that actually steals from people's hands, I know it's there for quite a few rounds. But the steal card is random. You steal a random card from their hand. So I know you've got the crown. You have 5 cards in your hand. I play 2 cards to steal 2 cards from your hand, right? I'd steal 2 at random. I still don't get the crown. I know you have it. I just have no means of physically actually taking it from you. But then the worst thing in this is that you've got this track of the hand size. And I thought that was going to be cool at first. It's broken. Because you have 2 cards in here. One to lower somebody else down, and one to raise only yourself. Now, if you raise yourself to a high hand size, you have so many options and so many powerful actions, it's unreal. But if you get lowered down to a hand size of 3 or 2, your options are greatly diminished, and you have no easy way to raise it back up unless you play the pie card to raise up your own hand size. But what if you never draw the card? Because I went through 6 rounds of the game and never saw a single wild or pie card. Never saw one. So my hand size got dropped to 3, and I had no means to raise it above 3 for the rest of the game. Yeah, or at least not until like the last round, at which point it was pointless. But yeah, so I'm having to mess around with 2 or 3 cards. And if you can't raise yourself back up, you're done. You've got no means of doing anything. You'll draw 1 card of each type, most likely. So it's like, oh, I'll steal from you, but I can only look at 1 card. Oh, I want to look at people's hands because I think the crown's moved, but I can only look at 1 person. You know, and oh, I'll raise myself back up a hand size, but I've only got 1 pie card. Therefore, I'm only going to go up 1 hand size. Whoopie-doo, 2 to 3. Such a change. And then the ambush one card is you lower somebody else's. People could literally just lower your hand size just to be dicks, but you ideally should put it on the person at the top. But you need to play at least a good 2 or 3 of them for it to actually make a tangible difference. And that involves, luckily, drawing into them. But then if you could spend your time doing that, and then the player straight afterwards plays 3 pie cards and goes all the way back up. You just wasted your time. You've only got 8 rounds in this game. You've only got 8 turns. This game is just so terrible. I hate it. You know, it's not funny. It's not interesting. The cards are completely random. Your ability to do well is dictated by your hand size, which can easily be crippled to the point where you can never recover from it. And even if for the 3 rounds of the game, I know exactly that the crown is sitting in somebody's hand, if I don't draw a single steal card, I can't physically do anything about it. I have to draw a steal card or a wild, and if I don't draw any of them, which is kind of likely if you've only got a hand size of 3, then I can't do anything. I literally can't take his card. So the whole object of the game is just null and void at this point. I'm just sitting there going through the motions. Oh, I'll draw 3 new cards. I've trashed this hand. Great. Oh, great. I've just drawn 3 look at people's hand cards. So I literally can do nothing but look at people's hands, and I only care about one of you, and I already know where the crown is, so what are the point of this card? It's stupid. I mean, this game will still take a good 25 minutes, half an hour to play, but I would much rather play something like Lost Legacy. Lost Legacy did this concept of find a hidden item and a bunch of cards with shenanigans so much better. Seriously, try Lost Legacy. It's like a love letter clone with a hidden item that you've got to find. It's really cool. I actually kind of feel bad I sold my copy a while ago. I think I'm actually possibly, if I see another copy of it on a secondhand sale or on a cheap stall, I'm actually going to buy another copy because I think it was pretty solid. But yeah, I kind of do miss that game, actually. This game actually reminded me of a better game that I want to get, but I don't want to play this game ever. I don't want to see it on a table. I don't want to see praise for it. It's horrible. And I know this is meant to be some, oh yeah, it's fine for kids and they can have a laugh or whatever. Yeah, kids don't know any better when it comes to game design. You know, this is just such a waste. And I'm seeing adults play it. You know, somebody brought it out at a Southampton group. Now, I don't know if it, I mean, people were laughing in it, but what were you laughing at? I mean, there's nothing to laugh at this. If something gets nicked off you, chances are you'll never be able to nick it back. If you have a low hand size, you're doing nothing of interest in the game. So where's the fun, laughter in this? It's just so bad. This is terrible. Don't play it. 2 out of 10, 1 out of 10. You know, I hated this and I never want to see it again. Alright, let's try something a little bit more interesting. Well, how about the second game I played on that one? Metrorunner, which annoyingly on Board Game Geek is spelt as a single word, so have fun searching for that one when you're not realizing that's a thing. 2. Take a risky underworld jobs and hack your way to infamy as Mirror City's top runner. So yeah, this is basically Blade Runner / Netrunner, you know, type universe. It's all sort of hacking and digital and cyberpunk, you know, so it's got that kind of setting, but this isn't exactly the most thematic game in the world. This is a new one from Thunderworks Games. I think it was like a recent Kickstarter, and bear in mind I don't look at Kickstarters, but you essentially have this rondel track that you move around with your character, and you're basically getting resources in the form of cubes. What the different cubes are, I don't think even the rulebook explains. However, it does, you'll forget it instantly because it's literally just colors. And you're trying to complete these job cards, which is basically like Splendor. So you get the cubes, you trade them in for cards, you get the cards, and they trigger like little bonuses that, oh, I can move up this track, or I can get some more cubes or some credits, which allow me to do some boost bonus actions. You know, it's basically, like I said, it's a resource management game where you collect cards for points. That's most of the game. You've got a couple of tracks to level up, which, you know, are good for points and also an endgame trigger. But the main unique selling point of this, and I do mean the only unique selling point of this, because frankly, the game, I'll stress that I enjoyed it. It's very light. It's pretty much everything you've seen before, though. Like, there is nothing really new in this game apart from this one little hacking gimmick. And even then, it's nothing that we haven't seen before. It's just the fact that it's used in this way. This middle set of tiles here, which I've got to admit, in their metal Kickstarter version, do look fantastic. But it's like a Tsuro route connection mechanic, you know, where you got to put the tiles together and you follow the paths. Well, here you have these hacking cards. They can get you credits and infamy track levels. And what you do is that you have 2 green nodules that you have to like get from start to finish, and then there's a couple extra if you've leveled up enough influence to be able to access them. And the idea is that you have so many manipulations of these 9 tiles to set them up in such a way that you can make a route from A to B and collect the bonuses. It's a little gimmick. It kind of fits with the theme that's going on, but at the start of the game, you can get a couple of nice things from it. By the end of the game, you can do it so easily, it's trivial. Like, you can pretty much max it out every time. This is not a complicated thing to work with, and if you've got even a modicum of spatial awareness about you, you'll be able to max this out every time you look at any of the cards, so it just becomes trivial at that point. And infamy gets you more points than influence, so honestly, level up your infamy. Ignore influence. You get a lot of influence from doing job cards, but, you know, infamy lets you collect like cubes of your choice on certain action spaces. It's worth more points, and you know, all you have to do with influence is get about 4 spaces up the track, 5 max or something, which allows you to access more stuff in the hacking minigame. You'll be able to do that without even blinking, really, from doing job cards. But as soon as you get that high in influence, there's no point leveling up more influence because there's no extra benefit apart from a very slow progression of points. But infamy gets you a lot more points. So you would more than likely do that. And because the hacking game is not difficult, it's like you might as well just carry on doing that. But that aside, yeah, here we go. So this picture here, connect this green to this green, which, for 2 free manipulations, how would you do that? Well, easy. I mean, you can swap tiles, you can, you can swap adjacent tiles, you can wrap around and stuff like that. Well, all you got to do is swap these 2 around and boom, bingo, you've done it. But, do you want to connect the pink and the blue one as well? Well, that might be a little bit harder, but you've got a character card that lets you do various shenanigans with it and stuff like that. So, and it kind of does depend on the setup. Sometimes they might be just set up in such a way that it's easy to do anything. But, it's an interesting little gimmick, but it is a gimmick. The characters basically let you do some major manipulation. But the artwork is fine, nothing stellar. I mean, it does the job for the setting. The job cards are just, they might give you a little special ability like convert 1 cube into this cube, get a discount of a blue cube on this. I mean, they've got the setting right and some of the art fits it, but man, it is themeless, really. I mean, this one's like, these job cards: piggyback port surveillance, insight foreign revolution, pressure stockholders. At no point do you feel like you're doing any of those things. You are literally just trading in cubes for a card, so for pretty pictures. So honestly, the theme is kind of mostly lost in this game, apart from the weird hacking element. But the game is fine. I enjoyed it. I think it took a little bit long for what it was, but then some of that might have been down to one player AP in a bit, and we were playing with a young kid. So, as soon as you play with children, the game's going to go slower anyway. But, the game is fine. It does the job, but for something that was a Kickstarter, I mean, you'd almost think, okay, come on. We've seen this sort of thing done 100 times. You want to kickstart this and get funding for it. And yeah, it's not that expensive a game for the deluxe version, I'll give it that. But don't you want something a bit more new, a bit more unique? Something that's going to stand out from the crowd? This won't stand out from the crowd. I mean, I don't think it's bad. I think it's a 6 out of 10. It's above average. It does the job. It's light. It's not that long. Probably no APness. And that is the hacking game is what gets a bit few people APing, because they sort of go, right, I'm going to do the hacking action, and then they try to figure out how to do the patterns. And it's like, well, try and figure out how to do the patterns before you have your turn, because then, I mean, I was doing that on my one. It's like, right, I'm going to do the hacking action. I've already worked out I need to do this, and this. Done. I can do my turns really quick. Perhaps I've got good spatial awareness. I don't know. But, other people were struggling a little bit with it. But yeah, it's fine. I mean, the whole rondelle thing, you'd think that would restrict your movement a bit because you need to be in certain color districts to do certain things. But it's very easy to fast travel in this with the credits. So it kind of, takes away that whole restriction. And there's also a random element where when you do hacking jobs, cubes appear in the various districts. And when you do a district action there, you get to take all those cubes. It's random how they get put out. You might just be in a situation where some hacking happens and loads of stuff gets dumped on your space. Or it gets dumped near you, but it's the person before you gets to act first, and therefore they go nick it. Which, again, just seems like a very random swingy element. I mean, it's very powerful to get those sort of things. And the fact that it's just completely random, I think, hurts the game a bit. But the game is okay. It does the job, but it's just nothing new. The hacking gimmick will get tiresome after about half the game, and then the rest of the game is just what you've seen before. So yeah, 6 out of 10. Average game, but above average game, because it does get the stuff it's aiming for right. But if I never saw it again, I wouldn't really miss it. Right, and then finally, we're going to talk about Skymines. Oh god, yes, an Alexander Pfister game. I've actually played one recently. Well, this is the re-implementation for Mombasa. Never actually played Mombasa. I just had no desire to. But my friends at the moment that I'm in a group with want to play games we've played before. And they thought that I'd played Skymines at some stage with them, but nope. This is the game I kind of avoided because I knew it was an Alexander Pfister game. It looked bone dry. It was re-implementing a game that didn't sound great in the first place, Mombasa. So I avoided this one and just let other people get on with it. But I'm in that sort of state where I'm like, all right, fine. I'll try anything once. Let's give it a try. See what it happens. I mean, let's face it. Stranger things have happened. I like Great Western Trail New Zealand, so who knows, maybe this re-implementation would improve on the original, in that sense. It would do something that would go, oh yeah, this is better. So I thought we'll try it. We'll try Skymines, and it took us a while. It's not the shortest game in the world, even though it likes to Well, it does say 75 to 150 minutes. I think you're definitely looking at the 150 minutes side, possibly longer, but and 3.87 weight. That I don't really get. This game doesn't really feel to me like that heavy a weight game, okay? I mean, I would put this at mid-weight. There's only so much you've got to think about with this one, although I suppose that's not entirely accurate, but I'll get onto why in a minute. It's kind of confused. It's a weird weight level. It's from Deep Print Games, Pegasus Spiel, and the idea is that you are operating on the moon. You've got these companies that you're building outposts for. These outposts will increase the value of a company, and you invest in them and get resources and get victory points. Yeah, it's an Alexander Pfister game. Did you honestly think this was going to have any modicum of a theme? No, the theme is completely pasted on here. I mean, it wasn't exactly that strong in Mombasa. Here it is completely pasted. There is no theme here. It's just, it's on the moon, so let's make everything look all spacey and say we're getting minerals and stuff. But that's about it. Components-wise, pretty basic. Some tiny little wooden buildings, some cards and that. Although whoever did the graphic design on this, I mean, some of the graphic design is not too bad. But whoever came up with the color choices for some of these resources needs to have their head beaten. Because, I'm sorry, but you have to have been a colossal moron to come up with the idea that you would have minerals and cobalt, the colors that they are, cobalt or whatever it is, a carbon or something, right? Because you've got three types of resources. You've got titanium, which is grey, so it sticks out quite a bit. Then you've got minerals, and then you've got carbon. Carbon is a very light blue, right? So cyan blue, basically. The minerals is a very light bluey green. And in pretty much any light you get, the two of them are very similar. This picture probably does it as much justice as it possibly can, but I guarantee you, you're looking at this across the table, or like, you know, a zoomed out picture here. Let's say you're sitting in this person's point of view. You will constantly get minerals and carbon mixed up because they are too similar in terms of color, and I do not get why somebody in graphic design thought the color choices would make sense. I mean, if you're trying to make this a colorblind thing, then be careful, because I don't know if this actually makes it easier for colorblind people, but you made it so much harder for people who aren't colorblind. Yeah, so you're for it doesn't make sense why you would do that. If you're going to make it colorblind friendly, then don't make it, you know, harder for the people who aren't colorblind as well. Any other color? Could you have not picked another one? Could it not have been red? Could it have not been bright, dark green and very light blue or something? Could it have not been orange? Yellow's already taken. Yellow and orange is taken for energy, I guess. But there must have been another color. Purple, something, anything to make it stand out. But yeah, the choice they made on that was stupid. But anyway, I digress. That's a small niggle. So the game itself. Your turns involve this card mechanic, and the card mechanic involves you planning, almost sort of like pseudo-programming. So you have these cards, some get you resources, some get you energy, some let you do research, and etc. And you put them in these slots at the bottom of your board, and you flip them over simultaneously, and then you do your actions one at a time, but you do so by flipping the cards over. And you use them in order to buy more cards, do research, build outposts, that kind of thing. Now, the reason this game has a high weight level is not because the rules complexity is high, because honestly, the rules complexity is not that high. I mean, if you've played heavy games, this one will come fairly straightforward, and nothing really stood out as like, oh yeah, that was particularly fiddly. The idea is that these cards you lay out, and when you do an action, it's based on what you have visible after you flip the card. This isn't something that's that intuitive, though, with other games. So I'm used, usually you play a bunch of cards out, like in a deck builder or something like that, and you get to use everything that's on those cards. But this one has you requiring to plan out your turn pretty extensively, but then what you commonly do, and all of us did this, but I tripped up about 4 or 5 times doing this, and it was getting more and more frustrating every time I did it, which granted I will put down to bad play mostly, but still, it's frustrating. The idea that you go, right, I know I need these to, especially with the research track, this is where it really tripped me up. I lost the game because I couldn't do any research, because every time I thought, right, you can move this white counter across all these tiles, and these tiles tell you the prerequisite for what you need to go across these tiles, right? So I have it planned out that I'm going to go across these research tiles, but I need to grab a card first. I need to take this before somebody else takes it, that sort of thing. And then you flip one card, and then you realize that you no longer can do the research thing you were trying to do, because you flip one card. And by doing it, You might think, oh, well, it's okay, you can do it a bit later. No, because when you have your turn, the cards move to the top of these discard stacks, and you can only take back one of those discard stacks every round. And there's not that many rounds in the game. So if you make a mistake in this game, you will not be able to do the same thing you were trying to do for at least a good 2 rounds, and that's assuming you draw the, you have enough cards for it in the first place. So getting a plan wrong fundamentally destroys your tempo and your ability to score some points. I could not research because every time I needed to research, I forgot that you're supposed to have cards visible face up and all this nonsense. And it's like, for Christ's sake, I get that's part of the game, but it's not an intuitive thing because in most games you don't have that. And so there's nothing to remind you that this is a thing. There's no iconography on the board or on your reference card or anything like that to remind you that this is an important thing in the game, and you just constantly forget it's a thing while trying to plan out your turn because you're already trying to plan out, I need to do this and this and this and this. Right, I've got the plan, that's good. But then the fact that you've got to do it in a prescribed order as well, it just makes it a really fiddly, convoluted system. And just frustrating every time you trip over it. I mean, if I didn't trip up on a couple of those researchers things, I probably would have easily won the game. But it cost me the game because of it, despite doing well at other stuff. Although, also, balance-wise, I'm a little bit concerned. I mean, the outposts, we played on the reverse map, which has you getting blocked up quite easily on there. It's very difficult for the company values to shift on that side of the map. And so it felt like that when a company becomes really good, it's going to stay really good. So why would you not invest in that company? The research tiles I just found a bit fiddly. This whole, helium track or something on the left is literally just a convoluted way to have a track level up for points. That's all it does. But leveling up on these 2 tracks does allow you to unlock more slots, so instead of only playing 3 cards around, you can play 5, or 4 or 5, but for most of the game I was stuck on only 3 because those mistakes cost me the ability to play more cards, and if you play this game with only 3 cards that you can play, you will lose. End of story, because you just can't get enough done, and it's not helped by the fact that the board has a mechanic I really don't like, which is this majority thing. I'll try to find it, but basically, if you have the majority of a particular resource type in your icons on your cards, you get to have these, here you go, these max ones here. So if you've got the max energy, you can put your worker on here and it locks it for the round, and you get a bonus based on how many of them you actually have. The problem is that these bonuses you get are substantially good. They level you up colossal amounts on these various share tracks, and this is how you basically get the majority of your points, as well as unlock cool abilities and stuff. But if you don't get these max abilities on a regular basis, then you are going to lose. You cannot win the game without getting some of these. But you don't know what other players are going to play. You don't know if other players are going to suddenly beat you on Carmen or whatever at this time. So it's random as to whether you stand a chance of getting them. And if you are, in a position where, somebody else is, on par with me, then I have to choose between getting this really cool bonus or doing my original plan. And if I go along with the original plan, then somebody else gets to go, oh, well, I'll get the max bonus then. And I don't know, these max bonuses just feel too powerful and too, impactful. If you don't get them, you're going to lose. The game itself is not bad. I didn't hate it, but I think this is kind of like a 5 out of 10 for me. If I don't play it, I wouldn't really care. I certainly would play better next time because I wouldn't trip up so much over that stupid face-up card rule. But there's no theme in here to capture anything. I mean, this whole way you level up research tiles just feels like a clunky mechanic that could have been so much more streamlined and, is just there to be a Euro mechanic. Certainly getting high on one of those tracks is going to score you so many points that I think everything else will probably be dwarfed, because even if you get I had maximum value. I had 9 shares in one particular company that was really good value, and I still lost because I couldn't get very high up these 2 tracks on my player board. And the person who won did. So these 2 tracks on your player board seem like the paramount thing you got to do, and the outposts are just another thing you can do. The boards are different, so you do get different abilities for these various companies, so that is quite cool. There is a bit of variety, although, again, some of the abilities are definitely better than others. I mean, the amount of effort you go to get a 4th worker isn't worth it. I mean, you rarely have decent amount of stuff to do with 4 or 5 workers, so why do that? The ability to get discounts on certain cards or get free energy and stuff is so much more useful than getting an extra worker by miles. Wish I knew that when I tried to get an extra worker. But yeah, it's just, the game just seems a bit inflexible. You can end up with plans being screwed very easily because somebody takes something you want, or you flip a card without remembering, oh yeah, I've got to do it in this prescribed order. And if you do make a mistake, you can't recover because it will take you at least 2 rounds to even have a chance of getting the same setup. And there's not enough rounds in the game. So anytime you make a mistake, it is so costly and so punishing that it just doesn't become fun. The game is okay. But again, it's also not unique. There's no unique selling point in this, apart from the fact that you have got this, like, move the cards to the top and get a discard stack, although I think some games have done that before. But I'm not a massive fan of programming games either, and this one is kind of like a pseudo-programming game because you've got to effectively program the entire round exactly. Not a fan. I like to have some flexibility, like a chance to be able to go, well, you know what, I'm going to do this instead. But you don't. If you don't follow your prescribed plan to the letter, you are going to have problems, and it will just mean that you lose. So it's another one of those Alexander Pfister games that I'm glad I skipped. I mean, what's its ranking on Board Game Geek? You know, does it have a ranking? Can I find out? Rank 643. That feels a bit overrated to me. It's okay, but yeah, if I don't play this again, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. You know, I would certainly play it better the next time round, but nothing about this wants to bring me back. I mean, I didn't find a single mechanic in it different from any other game that I could play that's more fun or unique or like enticing to bring me back, and there's no theme. So there's no theme to keep me immersed in the game. It's just a mechanical set of Euros mechanics. That's the best way to describe it. So yeah, it's got its fans, but I only see it played every now and again. But this one just felt like, meh, you know, whoopee. I'd much rather play Great Western Trail New Zealand, frankly. You know, certainly, I mean, I'm going to take a guess. There's a Sky Moons review here from the Dice Tower. I'll bet money that is a Chris Yee and, I bet there's got to be a Chris Yee and Wendy Yee, like, review or something, because they're the sort of people that this game is tailor-made for them. You know, I can't see Tom Vassell liking a game like this. But, yeah, meh. Alrighty then, so assuming you're still listening after I've just berated a Alexander Pfister game, which is almost like berating Jesus these days. So I just want to talk about a question that came up by patrons when I asked for suggestions, and somebody asked me, how do you get to be a bit more analytical in, like, when playing games? And it's like, what do you mean by analytical? And it's like things you look out for, you know, ways to critique a game and that, because some of them were board game designers and they wanted some tips and that, and I thought, okay, this is interesting, although a little bit hard to sort of put it into words. But I'm just going to basically summarize a few sort of key points here that I've written down that, you know, I think about when I'm playing games, and how I kind of, you know, this isn't like a comprehensive guide to how I review a game. It's just, these are some of the things I consider and what my thinking process with this. So we'll talk about length first. So length of a game. How long is it? Now, that does not mean a game that is 3 hours is too long and hate it. You know, there are some games on my shelf there, like Forbidden Stars, some of these sort of Euros, Ark Nova can take a while, you know, and a lot of the times these can still justify the 3 hour length because they're that involved. Hegemony is like a 3 to 4 hour game, but I don't know how you would condense it down to 2 hours. It's too, like, involved. But man, is it a fun game. So, you know, some of these games can be long and still be good. The question is it too long for what it is? And have other games done it shorter? And a few of these, some of these things are going to repeat as I look at other games. You know, there's definitely an element of, you know, have other games done it better? So I did mention Hegemony, but Hegemony is a massive, involved, heavy game, lots of player interaction, asymmetric rolls. You could not make this a short game if you tried. It's just not going to happen. But I still love it. I am immersed. I am involved. I'm not on downtime much, unless you got a really AP player. But yeah, this one keeps you involved. And that is something to think about with length. You know, when you're playing a game, is it too long for what it is? Has it outstayed its welcome? A particularly good example would be the recent review I did for Empire's End. Empire's End is basically the no thanks mechanic, but made 4 times longer. You know, it's, well, that at bare minimum, it's 10 times longer, really. But this one is just that bidding mechanic, but you've thrown some extra little, like, abstract Civ stuff on it. The thing is that after playing it, I'm like, well, it's pretty random. It's just the same mechanic. And honestly, after playing No Thanks on Monday, I'm like, I'd just rather play No Thanks rather than this. No Thanks does it in about 5-10 minutes, and this one is like an hour and a half to 2 hours at times. It's, why do I need to play this for that length of time? But this also is a very rinse-repeat game. So you go through the track in the middle there to say, right, we're doing industry, and then we're doing economy, that kind of thing. And you go through this track, and it's just rinse-repeat the same stuff. It's like another disaster, combat, disaster, economy, disaster, industry, disaster. Oh, we got to do 6 in a row now. And it's just constant rinse-repeat. And it definitely feels like it outstays its welcome every time. Wild Gardens behind me, that one, is 90 minutes to 2 hours. It's got very simple rules with 4 players. You could argue it kind of gets to that point where it's a bit long, but I think the length is pretty good for a game that's 2 to 3 players. I think it doesn't outstay its welcome. You're involved. You're immersed in this, beautiful artwork and colors. Yeah, there's not that much of a theme, but certainly the artwork will keep you looking at nice stuff. And, the length is kind of justified. But that's kind of what I'm saying. It's like, does the length fit the game? There's no point having some game that's basically love letter that you play for 3 hours. Munchkin, for example. Oh, Munchkin's a perfect example, right? You play Munchkin. Yeah, it's chaos. It's meant to be mainly for silliness and stuff like that. But would you honestly say Munchkin's a good game? Do you want to play Munchkin for 2 hours that this game can last, where it's just literally playing cards for, like, take thatness, and this is a genre that is sadly bloated at this point? I don't want to play this game for 2 hours. I'd play it for 30 minutes maybe, but 2 hours? No, and that's something to think about. While on the subject of randomness, actually, so we got this one here, randomness. Just because there are random elements in the game doesn't mean it's necessarily bad either. I mean, Camel Up is just flat out chaos, but it's silly chaos. It's a racing game, you're bidding on stuff, and it's meant to be not taken seriously. So it works kind of in that one, but you still have control over what you're bidding on. It's your choice. But then something like the Munchkin, for example, where you are playing these cards and just bad stuff happens. Well, firstly, the random stuff that can happen is just punishing the players. But also, again, this combines with length. Do you want to play a game that is mostly random for 2+ hours? You can play it for a quarter of an hour. Fine, let's play Love Letter. There's random card drawing that, but the game's like 5 minutes a piece. What does it matter? But then play something like, people use this argument with Arc Nova, with luck of the draw of the cards, but I'd argue Terraforming Mars gets it worse. But, when you play a 3-hour game and there's a random element in it, so... maybe not 3 hours, but a long game. So, for example, I'll go Dune Imperium, right? So, I don't like this one anywhere near as much as other people. And one of the key reasons for that is because I think the random element kills this game. Because it's deck building. So, deck building has a element of randomness. You will draw cards and not necessarily get the ones you want. But the problem is, in most games, you can still do something useful with the hand you've got. Here, though, because worker placement spots are limited, and because it's so few victory points, and because there's only so much time, you must get... When you need something, you want the card to do it. But the cards also dictate where you're allowed to go on the board. If they didn't dictate that, I think this game would actually be a lot better, because then you would have the freedom to at least go to the worker placement space you want to go to, even if you don't have the cards to necessarily make it as good as it could be. But here... I desperately may need to go to a particular faction, because if I don't, I won't have anything for the combat, nor will I be able to beat you to nicking this, alliance token off me. Great. Draw my cards. I know I've got something in here that will do it. Oh, I didn't draw it. Great. So now I can't go there. Oh, you've gone there now. Right. So bad luck meant that I couldn't do this. All right, well, I suppose I could get some spice. Oh, I don't have any yellow cards either. I've just conveniently drawn all my blue ones. And this game is not short. This game is like a 2.5 to 3 hour game at the best of times. So that level of punishing randomness in that long a game, which normally is meant to be a fairly thinky affair, doesn't work. It doesn't gel. It doesn't fit. So if you're going to have a random element in your game, it should be more mitigatable, and it should be justified for the length. Theme. Let's go back to theme. So, theme... Is the game immersive? Will it keep you engaged in that respect? Now, not everybody cares about theme. So if you're going to make a very dry mechanical Euro, then fine. You don't necessarily need to have a theme. But if you're going to have a theme, then I don't know why I stopped the camera there for a sec. You need to at least make certain the theme works or is relatable. I mean, if I play something like Ark Nova, yes, okay, it's not the most thematic game in the world. You know, you are getting cards for icons, but animals are a great theme. You know, it's just a theme that most people like animals. And, you know, when you're playing this, I just get immersed in the fact that I am building a zoo. Yes, it is abstracted to a point, but I still like the setting that I'm in. But okay, let's talk about a really thematic game that I love. Let's talk about Sentinels of the Multiverse, for example. I mean, theme is a lot easier to do in something like a co-op game. And this one perfectly represents the theme of superheroes. Yes, it's a card game and you're playing it with various effects, but you feel like a superhero team. The villain is the big bad. You are killing minions, you are blowing up devices, you are utilizing your powers. The game flow even works thematically, where you get beaten up a lot at the start and then you get powerful, you rise up and then you come back, a bit like Avengers Endgame type scenario. You know, this one really does the theme well, and if you are going to put theme in the game and make it a focal point, then you certainly do need to make certain it's strong. Now, if I'm being critical of games, it's a case of, right, is this meant to have a theme? No? Then okay, fine, you're a dry mechanical theme. But you can tell when some games are trying hard to justify the theme they've done, even though the theme is blatantly not there. You know, and it can be a little bit of a weirdness. I mean, Pulsar 2849, this is the game I love, but oh my god, is it a dry point salad. But it goes on, you know, you've got a mechanic about spinning gyrodynes and, you know, this is how what they would do with pulsars and stuff. And it's like, dude, this is a mechanical point salad. Stop trying to justify the theme in whichever way you can. And I'm trying to think of some other examples, I guess. I mean, even Daybreak, I suppose, that I've done recently. I mean, it's got a climate change theme, but when you're playing the game, I don't feel like I'm really stopping climate change. Hell, I probably just feel like I'm stopping a disease. It's basically a pandemic-y type scenario. But at the end of the day, you're playing cards and doing icons. I don't really feel like I'm stopping climate change when I play Daybreak, for example. And there's got to be others. Scythe, you could argue that something like Scythe theme is a little bit pasted in some respect. Yeah, it may look good and have nice artwork, but that doesn't necessarily mean the theme is there. And, you know, if you're going to do an atmospheric game like Nemesis or Mansions of Madness, then yes, you're definitely going to want theme strong, and those games have a strong theme. So great. But, you know, I'm trying to think, is there anything on my wall, anything on my shelf that I can see that is a blatant, like, lack of theme, despite the fact it tries to be? And they do exist. These ones do exist, but I struggle. And I suppose stuff like, you know, I mean, Mystic Vale and some of these card games where they try to say, oh, I mean, Runestones. Actually, Runestones is a good one, actually. So, you know, Runestones is, you know, a very dry deck builder. It's a fantastic dry deck builder, but it, you know, the artwork and all the stuff is like saying, oh, you're doing magical artifacts and you're druids and you're doing all this. And it's like, dude, there's no theme. Don't stop trying to sell it as a thematic game, because it really isn't. But this is kind of one that's not necessarily one that drops games marks just because it's not thematic, but it's a case of, if you are going to have a theme, how well have you like respected that theme? Particularly with IPs. You know, if a game pastes an IP on a game, then you need to have a good theme. You know, if you make an abstract game with Cyberpunk, you know, which is a beloved PC game, then you better have a good Cyberpunk theme. If you've literally just copied and pasted an IP on it to try and sell copies, I'm going to call you out for it. Rules complexity. Well, you know, how easy is the game to learn for what it is? You expect the game to be complex if it's a Lacerda game, but then it does take a while and it is heavy and involved, so that makes sense. But I don't expect a game that is meant to be for gateway gamers to suddenly be a bit too complex. Now, you know, this can be a little subjective, but then, for example, Dog Park. Reviewed it recently. Very nice, light game. I think it was trying to portray to a gateway audience, or some people will try to claim it's a gateway game. It really is not. You've got too much going on with dog abilities on cards to make it gateway level, so it doesn't work. It's a little bit too complex for that market. So I'm certainly going to be critical of the fact that a game that has the theme that really should make it gateway level isn't gateway level. The game is still good, but I would have liked it if it was just a bit more new gamer friendly. But then Wild Gardens, actually I'll go back to that one actually, slight spoiler alert for the review, but the one thing that this game has going for it is that for the amount of that you're involved and the amount of depth it has, the rules are not complicated to this game at all. There's not a lot of rules to learn. And when it makes it easier to teach the game, that's a good thing. But then also the Terminus review I did, I only gave it I think I gave it a 6 out of 10, which is still decent enough rating. But one thing I did give Terminus a bit of credit for is, yes, it does get the graphic design a bit wrong in places, and, there are a couple of fiddly bits. For the most part, for the amount of weight that this game has, there's not a ton of rules in the game compared to something else. Like, there are heavy games here where you've got so many rules it's unreal, but you still play it for that long. But this one seems to have like half the rules of a typical Euro game, and yet is still as heavy and weighty, which is a good thing. So, is your rule, are the rules to this game too complex? Are they too convoluted? Is it too fiddly? Are the reference cards garbage? The reference cards need to be good. They need to make it so that I don't need to check the rule book for most of the time. And if I have to still check the rule book despite you having reference cards, then there's a critical falling. But yeah, you certainly think about, like, this game, how simple and heavy is it? Is the rules teach and rules curve justified for it? I mean, arcs. I've got arcs over there. I've heard that the rules are a little bit of a chore to learn, but we'll see. But the game doesn't look like something that should be that complex. So if I read this and I find that it's a bit of a chore to do, then I'm going to be a bit critical of it. But then you could also argue this is also down to rule books. So is the rule book good? Certainly, if you had trouble learning the game because the rule book was bad, you should be critical of that. I mean, that should be an easy thing to analyze out. Have you played similar games where you've had a much easier time learning it? Do you tend to play heavy games? Great. Well, out of the heavy games you've played, which ones did you find easy to learn and which ones did you find more of a chore? Why did you find them more of a chore? Was it a bad rule book? Was it a lot of fiddly rules? Was it just too many rules in general and it could be more streamlined? These are things to think about. Other games. Empire's End was a great example, but are there other games that already do this? We're coming to a point where there's so little innovation in the industry that we're basically seeing the same stuff made all the time. So the question is, when a new game comes out, is it any different from something we've already seen before? And if it's not improving the formula, then why does the game need to exist? Empire's End tries to take a mechanic that is done in a tiny little filler game and make it into something a bit bigger. So, okay, so No Thanks is already good for this reason. Does this one work when you've already got No Thanks? And personally, I don't think it does. I think I would just rather play No Thanks. But the one I talked about earlier, Metrorunner, I said that it doesn't really have a unique selling point. It's like stuff we've seen before, get resources that are cubes, generic cubes, trade them in for cards, get points. Well, we've seen this done 100 times. So when you're being analytical over whether this is a decent game or not, you can't review it in a vacuum. You have to consider the rest of the market, because I can't recommend a new game that comes out just because it's new, if it's got zero innovation and is just basically a carbon copy of something we've seen before. It's why I'm not a big fan of roll and writes, because roll and writes just seem to rinse and repeat the same boring tropes. Here's a bunch of little mini games that have no thematic connection whatsoever, cross things off, get victory points. So how can I say that the next one that comes along is fantastic when all I'm seeing is the same stuff all the time? You've got to, consider that. But then also, as I say, compare the mechanics to other games. Compare the theme to other games. Superhero theme. Is this superhero game more thematic than this other superhero game? Is this point salad give you more options than this other game? Does this one feel more restrictive than this other game? You've got to consider other games in the market within the same type of game that you're making, and that's a big factor. Because if something did it better, then yours didn't need to exist. Let's see, Runaway Leader, Knockout. I mean, certainly if I'm being critical of games from that perspective, it's like, okay, can you be knocked out of the game to the point where you might as well not even, play it? One of the games that I'm really critical about, like I really do not like, is Food Chain Magnate. This is like a 1 out of 10 for me. I hate this game with a passion, right? And I know it's got its diehard fans. I am most certainly not one of them, but then I'm not a fan of pretty much anything made by Splutter Games. I think I hate all their games. But, not one of them. I don't think I like any. But this game is one of those games where if you make a bad move or wrong decision in the first 1 to 4 turns, you're done. Like, you will not be able to get an engine going. You're done. You're going to lose, and you're there for like 4 hours there, 240 minutes. You're there for 4 hours, or like at least, and you can't do anything. Wow. I mean, that's supposed to be good game design. And the stupid thing is that this guy has the people who make this have this saying where they go, if you can't lose on the first term, then what's the point of the first term? But then the rebuttal to that is, if you can win on the first turn, then what's the point of the rest of the game? It's because, you've got to have some degree of catch up or some degree of, I'm contributing to this game. But if you feel like you have no chance from the get-go because things started off badly, then why play the rest of the game? That's not fun, and certainly I'm very critical of this game because it's like that. How is that fun to know that your first few turns will completely decide your ability to win? It's not fun. It doesn't work. Runaway leader, similar thing. If you get a game where the leader just gets further and further ahead and it's a nightmare to catch them up, that's something to be critical for. One that does this, I think, a bit too much is Lords of Waterdeep. Lords of Waterdeep does have a bit of a runaway leader issue. If you start off well and you continue to do well, there's not a lot you can really do to hamper them apart from playing those really annoying mandatory quests. But if they're doing well, it's not going to hold them up that much, and they still get a little bit of points for them, so no big deal. But I would say that Lords of Waterdeep's one of its problems is that, yes, you can have somebody just run away with the game and you're not going to catch them up. Something to be critical about. I mean, you want to have a game where it's tight-knit scores. You want to be, in a situation where it's like, yes, I reckon I can get it. It's not going to be easy, but I reckon I can catch you. Let's just do this. Come on, we can do it. If you've got that kind of feeling, then brilliant. But if I'm already like 40 points behind somebody because they've started off well, I'm like, well, we might as well just give this game to you then because you're going to win. There's no way I can catch you up, so why are we playing? And then that means not very enjoyable. All right, how many more of these I got? Setup and takedown. Oh yeah, setup and takedown. So, being analytical with that one, how long does the game take to set up and put away? Well, I've definitely been critical of some games in this, and, there seems to be a consensus at the moment that everybody's in this dream world bubble where time does not exist. And so nobody factors in the setup or takedown for a game. So publishers never print the setup or takedown time on a box. I really wish they would. They never factor it into the time it takes to play the game, nor the rules teach. They really should, because for the most part, you are going to have to teach people, and you always have to set up and take down a game, so you should have it factored into your time frame. But there are so many times where the box will say 60 minutes, but it will take 20 minutes to set it up, 20 minutes to teach it, and by the time this 60-minute game is finished, it's 2 hours later. So it ends up with that problem. But is the setup and takedown justified? For what this game is, for what other games exist that can do it quicker, am I justified to do this? And one of the biggest misses for me on that front is, yes, I'm sorry to bring it up, Voidfall. Look, whether you love this game or not, fair enough. I liked it fine. I gave it a decent review from a solo perspective, but I will refuse to play this multiplayer ever again. But even then, my rating has dropped for, even as a solo game, and I sold it and I never want to play it again. The problem this game has is the length and investment required. I mean, let's go back to the rules complexity. The rules complexity of this game is off the friggin' chain. There's so many things you've got to bear in mind, a lot of little edge rules. So learning this game takes an absolute load of time, right? Then you've got, now it does do well on certain other things, like there's not a lot of randomness in the game. Great. There's not it's a very heavyweight game. It's certainly very thinky, so it's doing pluses on that. But then let's look at setup and takedown. This game takes anywhere between 40 to 60 minutes to set this thing up. It is ridiculous. You have got to take so much out of this game to get it on. I mean, you need to figure out which scenario you're doing. Then you've got to populate these hexes. Sorry, you've got to put these hexes down. So you've got to find the right ones first. Then you've got to put them down. Then you've got to put these various tokens on various ones depending on the scenario. Then you've got to put these corruption markers everywhere. Then you've got to put the corruption walls on. Then you've got to find out where you're starting as a player. Then you've got to set up all the players' individual boards. Then you've got to think, right, hang on, which factions are we playing? Okay, so which factions are not in the game? Which ones are fallen factions? Right, we got to get the technologies for them. Right, well, let's find you've got these tiny little boxes for each one. Right, well, let's find the ones that we need. Right, so we got there. So we need these particular technology cards. Right, so fine. Which one are we going to pick? A or B? Right, we'll pick this one. Then we got to lay out more technologies there on the line. Everybody's still got their player board. Right, oh, you need to turn your dice to this particular section. You need these cards. You need your individual resource things set to this level. The setup is insane. And for a game like this, I've played heavy games, I've played heavy space games, the setup is not justified here. No game deserves like a 45 minutes, a 60-minute setup time. Nothing. And hegemony, I can set up hegemony in less than like 25 minutes, 25 minutes, and I've already got hegemony ready to go. Because a lot of it kind of makes sense, and I've got it down to a T. But you could argue, well, okay, you can get Voidfall down to a T. There is too much in this to get Voidfall down to a T. You've got to check so many things. And I'm pretty sure nobody's memorized the map layout from every scenario. So you're going to have to follow that. And it's just, such a pain to get it. And then when you put it away, whoa, you've got all these tokens everywhere, all these ships everywhere, all these little pieces, dice, cubes, your board. I mean, if your board state's going to look like this and, you want to put that away, and try and get it in the box with those tiny little trays that are used for each of the separate factions. Oh, have fun with that. Oh, have fun. So, is it justified? And for me, this was a big critical negative I had of the game. I don't think it is justified. I think no game deserves a setup time that's that much. And hopefully the image is working. It's kind of been a bit weird here. But yeah, I just can't see why you would have it like that. So, that's something to be mindful of. Now, is there other games? I'm trying to think of something where the setup's really quick. I mean, I suppose Terminus. I did mention Terminus. Terminus' setup is pretty quick when you play that as a multiplayer. Anything else that's pretty quick as a setup? Well, Wild Gardens doesn't take much to set up, but then it's a light game. I would expect it not to take that long. Let's think of a big game, though. Big, heavy game that doesn't take a huge amount of setup. I mean, out of the Lacerdas, I would say Gallerist is a fairly basic setup. I mean, you put some cute meeples in a bag, put out the art tiles, choose your starting location, a starting bonus tile, and set up some bonus tiles on the left-hand side. That's kind of it. I mean, for a Lacerda game, it's definitely got one of the lowest setup times, although compare that to something like On Mars. On Mars, takes a hell of a long time to set that one up. Very rules complex heavy, so that one, is very tricky to get to the table and played. And my reason I don't want to play On Mars anymore is because when I compare it to their other Lacerdas, it's too complex and too overly complex and too overly fiddly for what it needs to be. Let's see, something else with a quick set. Well, saying that, Living Forest. Now, this could be a negative here, actually. Living Forest, one of the negatives I do have of that game is that the setup is a little bit long for Living Forest. For what is a fairly simple game, you've got the individual players with their cards. Then you've got to set up the board with specific positions for your thing. Then you've got these trays to set up with the trees. That's very fiddly to do. You've then got the display of cards, you've got the fire tokens and all the other bit of tokens. If you've got the expansion, you've then got to set up the Kodama board. So there's quite a bit to set up in this game for what is a relatively light affair. So it's not just heavy games that this can affect. But trying to see anything else on my immediate shelf. Well, Seven Wonders Architects actually is not a bad shout. The setup and takedown for that game is now non-existent. Now, it's meant to be a fairly simple game at that, because it's a very light gateway level little card game. Well, good. That's something to give praise for and be analytical about. This game is meant to be super light and super easy, so it should be really easy to learn, really quick, and take very little time to set up and take down. Setup is literally to pull a tray out, take the box off it, put the tray next to you and your opponent, and you're done. Get going. Put some tiles out for your wonder. You're done setting this game up in about 5 minutes. You can teach it in 5 minutes. It is that simple. Then you get the game done and dusted within about 20-25 minutes and, half an hour absolute tops. And then when you put it away, all you got to do is just collect the cards together and shove them in the trays. It probably takes twice as long to take it down as it does the setup, but you can be done and dusted with this entire thing in 45 minutes. 45 minutes. You can set it up, teach it, play a whole game and take it down, have it in the box on the shelf, 45 minutes or less, which is what you want from a quick light game. So this one ticks those boxes, whereas something like Voidfall doesn't for me. Player count. So this can go to multiple players. So this game says 2 to 4 players. Maybe it says 1 to 4 players as a solo mode. Is the solo mode a good solo mode, or is it literally just copy and paste a beat your own score thing, like a lot of Kickstarters do? Wild Gardens, again, I keep bringing this one up, it's fresh on my mind. You know, that one has a solo mode where they actually went above and beyond trying to make it an interesting solo mode. More about that in the review. But then, you know, player count for something like Daybreak, again, slight spoiler alert for that one, is that this is a co-op game that doesn't feel like a co-op game. It's multiplayer solitaire. So the fact that it's got 2 to 4 players on the backs makes no difference because there's no reason to play it with more players than just yourself. But, you know, a lot of games I criticize for having the 5th player. They say, right, this game can go from 2 to 5 players because we want to sell more copies. Yet 5 players rarely works in a game, okay? I mean, let's take a game I like. I mean, it's not just ragging on games that I'm not a big fan of. I love Tribes of the Wind. I think this is a brilliant game. Very nice, very cool, light game. But it says 2 to 5 players on the box. You would have to be critically insane to play this with 5 players because it is your actions are dependent on the 2 people to the side of you. So that means this game is fundamentally a 3-player game. Works well in 2-player though. The 2-player variant's pretty good. And you could play it with 4. You won't have any effect on the person directly opposite you, but they will be influencing your 2 neighbors. That's not too bad. But if 4 players is dubious, why the hell would you add a 5th? There's no reason. All it does is adds to the time length and downtime. So it's not worthy. So when I'm being analytical of this game, I'm thinking, right, you've said 2 to 5 players. Does it scale well? Does the game actually scale with player count? Because some games don't. The map size doesn't change, the card display doesn't change, so you suddenly find that 2 players is very wishy-washy and freedom central, but then you get to the upper level and suddenly it's an absolute slugfest for spaces because there's just not enough spaces to cope with the player count. Well, that's evidence of something that doesn't scale well, and that's a critical problem because you're creating a fundamentally different experience with a certain player count when ideally the game should give you a similar experience with all players. Even Hegemony has this problem. You know, Hegemony is a 2 to 4 player game, right? How many people do you see play this as a 2-player game? Be honest. You might do it as a solo game, and even then as a solo game I would rather play this with at least 2 AI factions. You're playing as minimum 3 players, and typically most people who want to play Hegemony want to play it with a full count of 4. So why is the 2-player option on the backs? You know, if it doesn't work at a certain player count, you shouldn't even try. 7 Wonders, who plays that 2-player? Come on. It was always at least a 3-player game. I prefer to play it with a lower player count. Some people like to play it with a higher player count. But who the hell plays it at 2? Alright, the variant for 7 Wonders at 2 was garbage, so nobody does it, so why is it on the box? And if you're going to be critical of that game, you have to criticize the fact that the 2-player variant is garbage, because nobody liked it. The player counts, well, I mean, what does player count affect? It affects the tightness of the game. You know, is there not enough spaces to cope with things? It also affects game length for the most part. You know, most of the time when you add a player, it adds time length. Now, simultaneous games get away with this a bit more, but even then I find that that's a problem because even something like Planet Unknown, where some people argue, oh, well, I can play it with 6 players and it doesn't take any longer, well, you still have to go as slow as the lowest common denominator in your group. And the more people you have, the more chance you have of a lowest common denominator. So yeah, it's, you know, 60 to 80 minutes here where it says on the back. That is way too small a time frame. And trust me, this game goes on for longer than 80 minutes when you've got 6 players going. It just takes too long for people to hurry up and finish their turns. So this one I found that, you know, it scales well in the sense that you have a similar experience, but then bearing in mind you're only caring about maybe a player to the side of you every now and again in this game. For the most part, you're doing your own thing, so there's not really any player interaction in it, so why do I need to play it with more players? And I suppose that's the key word, actually, interaction. You know, if you're going to add more players to a game, is there a reason to add more players? Does the interaction increase? Hegemony? Yes, it does. An area control game? Probably. Yes, it does. Daybreak? There is no point adding extra players in that at all. More on that in the review. You know, other things. Forbidden Stars. I mean, you could play it 2-player, but you want a slugfest with 4, really, don't you? New Angeles, the underrated hidden identity game. You could play it with 4, but let's face it, you're trying to play it with 6, 5 minimum, so you want that extra interaction in there. And, it's another thing to be critical of. Whew. Yeah, throat is starting to go. We're at 1 hour and 20. I think I'm going to wrap it up at that point. There were other ones I could maybe go over, like Decision Space and a few other ones that I hadn't written down. But, by all means, you can put your thoughts in the comments about some ones that I didn't consider. But hopefully I was answering the question that you were asking for, because it was a little bit weird trying to understand analytical about games. But this is kind of like my thinking space. These are various characteristics of a game that when I play a game, when I review a game, these are the thoughts that are kind of going around in my head. So if you're designing the game, maybe this will help you think more about, all right, well, I want to do this, but should I? How does it compare to this? Do other people like it? I mean, you're supposed to get these things play tested, so you should already be getting some feedback, but some people will literally just play a game and go, oh, it's a new game, I like it, yay, new stuff, yay, jingle keys in front of them. There are some people that are that bad. Like, you could literally just shove a nice shiny box in front of them and they'll be like, oh yeah, love it, love it, love it, love it, gimme, gimme, and it's just really annoying when I see that. Me, I'm generally quite a critical person anyway. I am somewhat opinionated. I do like to get my opinion out, but that's just a personality trait. But I'm also, after playing lots of games, after doing this sort of thing on a blog, I'm naturally becoming more critical about games. And so, some publishers like that. I mean, if they get a really good review out of me, then they know they've had to jump over a few more hurdles to achieve that, as opposed to giving it to a channel that literally gives good reviews for everything they get in front of them, in which case, does it really mean anything if they give you a good review? It's like IGN. Does it really make any sense if IGN give a good review about anything? Because frankly, they give a good rating to just about anything, unless it's a very popular thing, in which case IGN like to give a very negative review just to be clickbaity. Yeah, they had problems with the Deadpool and Wolverine movie. Look, okay, it's not for everybody, but for crying out loud, it was good fun, wasn't it? So, there's stuff like that. But, yeah, hopefully that was an interesting one for you. So, by all means, enjoy. That was a long episode. 99, who knows what I'm going to do for 99? We shall see, but I might have a couple of extra game reviews to do on that one. Like, maybe I could get Draft and Write Records and Clink from Rebel Studio. Could possibly get those reviewed for that episode. That might be quite cool. And of course, the Patrons gave me a bunch of topics, so I'll pick another one out of there. But thank you to the Patrons for coming up with these ideas. They certainly are helping, and it will make episode 100 pretty cool as well. For now, I'm going to sign off, so take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and remember, regardless of whether you are as opinionated and critical of games as I am, it really doesn't matter if you are or not. Everybody thinks in different ways. It's still, at the end of the day, only a game, so let's not get too worked up about it, okay? Even though I suppose for me, that sounds slightly hypocritical, who knows, but I'm just trying to end it. Bye for now. Take care, everybody.